Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the final day of Cellissimo Masterclasses. My name is Finian Collins. I'm the Artistic Director of Music for Galway and Cellissimo. And it is my great pleasure now to introduce Mischa Maisky, who's coming to us from Belgium, from Brussels, to give our masterclass this morning to our students. We have 8 students taking part in the masterclass program. They have their own showcase concert this evening at 7 o'clock. And right now, I think we're going to hear one of them perform. Mischa, thank you so much for being with us. Alice Kelly, thank you for being with us, for looking after our masterclass program and making sure it runs as smoothly as possible. And now I will hand over to you. Thank you so much.
That's great. Thanks so much, Finian. So, Pather, if you'd like to join us for your lesson.
Hello.
Hello. Again.
Hiya, how are things? Okay.
Except the internet connection, everything is fine.
Okay, good here. Hopefully it won't be too bad anyway. So I'm going to play I'm going to play the third movement of Prokofiev's Cello Sonata in C major.
Pleasure. Bravo. Can you hear me? Because I barely can hear you. I don't know if it's only my connection or how is everybody else there? Could you hear him playing?
It did cut out a tiny bit, but I was able to hear most of it.
Because in my case, it's all very muted and very far away. I don't know why. It was before his voice was fine, but then once he started playing,
That might help a little.
I hardly can hear you at all now. And I can, yeah.
No?
Yeah. Anyway, that's fine. It doesn't matter. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fine?
Yeah. I can hear
Okay. Anyway, as you certainly know, teaching is not my specialty, and I do time to time so-called master classes with pleasure, because I'm very happy always to meet and hear young cellists and get inspired and learn myself. But I never had chance or time or need or whatever teach in a normal sense of a word. So whenever a young cellist after the concert asks, do you give lessons? I always say, I just now did, because I feel that the best way I can share everything I love, understand, and know and about music is through my playing. So I hope you can learn this way something. But of course, in the same time, I feel certain moral obligation to share certain things which I learned from both of my great teachers, because I'm always saying that I'm the luckiest cellist in the world, since I'm the only one who get this privilege to, and for me, both of them.
Sorry to interrupt, Mischa, you are breaking up a little bit.
No, I cannot reason.
You're freezing a
switch
bit.
to my phone.
Oh,
It doesn't.
this is a bit better now. You're back with us.
Yeah, but it's just impossible. It's just all the
I
time.
know, sorry, it's very frustrating.
It is really.
The connection is back now. I'm sorry about this. Very frustrating, but
It's not your fault. I'm sorry. It's I guess one of the problems is that I have too many children, and 4 of them
yeah,
right now on the internet here, because exactly from today we have new regulations with pandemic, lockdown, and school is closed, and
oh, I know, it's very
everybody's used.
It's much better now anyway. You can continue. Sorry to interrupt.
I will try, but
I'll just chime in if you freeze. Sorry, I think that's all we can really do.
yes. So as I was saying, I was incredibly to study with both Shostakovich and Piatigorsky, and both of them had very different approach to teaching than one used to. They never really showed much to students how to play cello. So that's why I want first of all to explain them. Don't worry, I have my cello here. I'm not going to play. It's just that these days I look better with cello in front of me, without going into more jokes about it. But okay, anyway, the point is that their approach to teaching was to help young students or to realize what is the final destination, the goal which they try to achieve, which means to help them to realize what composer wanted to say and how they interpret this. Because, I could summarize my whole attitude towards music making. I wouldn't call it philosophy, it's just maybe too pretentious, with couple of stories about musicians. There are many wonderful stories, but 2 of them are particularly to the point, even though they seem to be very contradictory, but in my opinion, they actually complement each other. One is with great Russian composer and pianist Sergei Rachmaninoff, who once was playing Beethoven concerto with young conductor, who tried to be very nice, and before the first rehearsal, asked him, "Maestro, please tell me anything about your interpretation. I'll do anything the way you like it." And Rachmaninoff said, "But I'm not an expert on Beethoven. So why don't we just play the way it's written, which usually is the best way?" So that's a very important point about being very faithful to the score and to the indications of the composers. Some of the composers indicated very little. In the case of Bach suites, we have hardly any indications. But then later, Beethoven, for example, and of course later, the composers were much more pedantic about putting as many indications as possible, and one should be always incredibly careful. And that's why I always suggest to use music even for the pieces which you play, maybe from memory all your life, so to say, to refresh your memory, because you think you remember, but there are many things which it's good to check always. The other story is quite the opposite, with young Arturo Toscanini meeting old Giuseppe Verdi and telling him, I'm sorry, maestro, I know you didn't write it here, but if you don't mind, I would like to make slight ritardando. And Verdi said, but of course, Arturo, no problem, no problem. And here in these places, I really feel like Poco Celerando. No problem, Arturo, no problem. And in this place, if you don't mind. And then Verdi said, but Arturo, it's all in the music. The point being that no matter how much composers indicated in their score, it's always necessary to be able to read between the lines, between the notes in this case, and be faithful not just to the text of the music on the score, but to the spirit of it. And of course, it then becomes very subjective, and that's why there's so many different musicians playing again and again and recording again and again the same music, and it's never the same and never boring, hopefully, at least. So that's very, very important point. And as well, the point the most important thing that I probably learned from both of my teachers is that the cello in our case, or any other instrument, be it violin, piano, whatever it might be, it's only what the word instrument implies. It's the vehicle which helps us to achieve the ultimate goal, which is the music, and not the other way around. Because nowadays, particularly, the level of technical level of playing instruments, cello, or whoever, is so incredibly high. And the danger is that young musicians sometimes fall into this trap of thinking that in order to succeed, you have to practice your instrument even more in order to be able to play faster, even louder, even cleaner, even better. Which of course is very important, obviously. But in the same time, the danger is that then the priorities get switched around and the music becomes secondary. It becomes a way of showing how wonderful you play your instrument, which is completely wrong. And that's why one has to, on a daily basis, to remind yourself who is who and what is what, and not to put carriage in front of the horse, so to say. And yeah, again, it's a question of balance, like everything else in life, because of course, we have to train our hands and continuously and be in shape and try to perfect our relationship with the instrument. But I believe that, because sometimes very often people ask, how much do you practice? How many hours a day? There is a classic question, which is, I always say, depends what one means by practice. Because as important as it is to train your hands, I believe it's even more important to train your mind continuously in order for your mind to be the leading force and your hands follow your mind. And so you can practice not only without instrument and without score, or with a score without instrument, or by listening to different kind of music, not necessarily even the piece you're playing. Although there's nothing wrong, I think, listening to other cellists as well. Some colleagues of mine proudly say that they never listen to other cellists. I do listen whenever I have chance, because you can, and I actually listen even to my own recordings, not very often, but sometimes, because I learned it from experience. That you can, it's important to follow your progress or lack of it. And you can always learn from something interesting, new, and from mistakes of others as well, or your own mistakes, continuously. But one can learn continuously. You know, there's a story which interesting about my teacher, Shostakovich. He told me once, he was in the jury of Tchaikovsky competition, and young cellist from wherever it was, maybe New Zealand, let's put it as far as possible, it doesn't matter, played Shostakovich concerto, which actually, maybe I should have told the story later, but it doesn't matter. And the concerto which was written for Shostakovich, which Shostakovich knew inside out, and edited and recorded and played, I mean, more than anyone else. So one would think that he knew everything. And he said it was amazing for him to discover in the cadenza. I don't know if you're playing Shostakovich concerto, but it doesn't matter. There's one, it's a very simple example, one D minor pizzicato chord, D, F, A, yes. And he always played logically D and G string, F and B string, and open A string. And suddenly he saw this young cellist who probably never even saw the picture of Shostakovich playing this the same with two open strings and F and G string, see? Which of course actually not only much easier, but sounds much better. And Shostakovich, he always fell from his chair. As much as he knew this piece, he never even thought about this little deal. It's just indication that, you know, in Russian we have expression, you might live 100 years if you're lucky. And if you're wise enough, you will learn until the day you die. You will still die ignorant. Because no matter how much you know, how much you learn, there's always I forgot the word in English, so place for improvement. So that's the point, that one should never stop refreshing your attitude towards whichever piece you play, or generally towards music making. And if when people ask me to give advice to young cellist musicians, I would say, look, there's many, of course, things one could advise them, but one of the most important things is to stay young. Young in your attitude, in your mind, in curiosity, and never to get lazy here and anywhere else, of course, too. And because, you know, one of my greatest ambitions is to live very long, but to die young. And, you know, I was very lucky not only to study with Shostakovich, but I was incredibly lucky to meet Pablo Casals and play for him for an hour and a half, or even more, actually. I played for an hour and a half, but then we spent a long time. He was talking in presence of Isaac Stern, Leonard Rose, and Eugene Stoneman in Jerusalem on the 18th of August, 1973. It was 2 months before he passed away, when he was almost 97 years young. It was amazing, the spirit and attitude. It just was totally remarkable and unforgettable experience. And to meet him and to hear him, actually, I even heard him playing, believe it or not, live, very little. He played for Golda Meir, Prime Minister of Israel at the time. And there is even a recording, I think, believe on YouTube, you can find probably. Anyway, he played C minor Saraband and the Song of the Birds, of course. And, you know, he married when he was 82 years old, and his wife, Martina, his widow by now, was 21. And so they had more than 60 years difference in age. According to Shostakovich, there was only one musician who had even bigger difference. It was Kodály, Sultan Kodály. When I went first time out of Soviet Union, it was to Budapest, the Casals competition, 1968. And Rostropovich told me, "Oh, you will meet the widow of Kodai, very young, very beautiful young lady." Because Kodai, when he was younger, he was married to older woman, and then when he was very old, he married younger. And he said he's the only musician who has bigger difference than Casals, but Casals has advantage because his difference remains, and Kodai's gets smaller since he was there. It was typical of Rostropovich sense of humor. But the point is that Sasha Schneider, who actually was translating during our meeting with Casals, who was a very close friend of Casals, he asked Casals once, aren't you afraid, Pablo, such a difference in age? You know, one can get heart attack. And Casals with his pipe said, "So what can I do? If she will have heart attack, she will have heart attack." And that's the attitude which, kept him young. And I met around the same time, I met Arthur Rubinstein, a few years later maybe, who was 89 years old at the time. He rehearsed with Jerusalem Orchestra, and I was in the audience. And while in the hall, while orchestra was still tuning, he tried the piano, some passage, and it was not quite perfect. So he said, "Yes, I'm not anymore 80. Because 80 was okay, but 89, it's not exactly the same." I mean, the point is that, age is only the number. And it's a question of certain flexibility of your mind and general attitude, which is extremely important. And Prokofiev, this piece is incredibly full of light and humor. Prokofiev was a very funny man. According to Rostropovich, there are many stories of, I could try to remember, Rostropovich told about different great composers he met, Shostakovich in particular. But Prokofiev he was very young, of course, with me. He was collaborating with Prokofiev. He was still studying composition himself. And his composition teachers were telling him to drop cello because he was studying piano in the same time. He played fantastically well piano, as you probably know. And they thought it was too much. But he realized that and made his decision. It's quite a funny story, maybe. Like here. When Prokofiev was writing symphony concerto, which originally was just supposed to be a new reduction, a version of his original concerto, but became an independent piece, he invited Rostropovich to stay with him in his country house in the summer. And so he actually participated during this composition. So Prokofiev gave him homework to write the 8 or 16 bars of cello passage, which he prepared in harmony stems, just for fun. And next day he expected the result. But Rostropovich said, Maestro, I still need more time to. The day after, when he asked if it's ready, Rostropovich said, yes, I already wrote something, but I feel I could work a little more on this. And then Prokofiev said, young man, I'm afraid you might be even less talented than Brahms. This was supposed to be the biggest insult because Prokofiev, maybe some other composers, Tchaikovsky, for example, for some inexplicable reasons, passionately hated Brahms, which I will never understand, but okay. And then the day after, when Rostropovich finally showed him his sketch in pencil, Prokofiev looked like this, took an eraser, corrected few notes, and Rostropovich saw how in front of his eyes, his mediocre composition from the touch of genius came to life. So he realized probably he's right. He is less talented than Brahms. And that's how he stopped when he stopped his composition studies. Anyway, that just, and he told me actually other funny things. I don't know, it's ridiculous, it has nothing to do with music, but still, since a couple of years, I drive Tesla, electric car, fantastic car, incredible acceleration. I mean, just unbelievable, like a rocket. But Rostropovich told us it was the mid-60s. how Prokofiev, 20 years or more, 25 years earlier, was giving him advice about the cars. It's strange. Yeah? He said, most important thing in the car is not the top speed, because what difference it makes if it goes 200 or 300 kilometers an hour? You will never drive so fast. And even acceleration, which Tesla is absolutely unbelievable, from the start, from 0 to 100 or 60 miles, it's not a Formula One and makes difference at the red light, how fast to take off. What is important is the reserve of power in the middle range when you drive normal speed, and if you have to overtake and suddenly there's emergency, that's where it might save your life. And that's what is so incredible, because of the power. But yeah, it's interesting because, you know, Shostakovich told us as well all kind of stories, which the same was with Pitigorsky, strangely enough. I spent only 4 months with Pitigorsky, opposed to 4 years with Shostakovich, but it was much more intense. Shostakovich was traveling most of the time, and Pitigorsky, it was the end of his life. He knew it, and he had lung cancer because of smoking all his life. And it was beginning of my new life. I was full of positive energy, and he loved speaking Russian. And I basically learned, I never learned English. I just picked it up on the streets of Los Angeles while studying with him. So I spoke a few words of English at the time, and even worse than now. And so we communicate in Russian. And for him, it was probably just as important as it was for me, in a way, to share his incredible life experience with someone who was like dried out sponge, absorbing it. It was very intense exchange. And I played for him practically every day, twice a week in USC, and the rest of the time his home. Every time different piece, because the idea was to get through as much repertoire as possible. I played everything I could and everything I couldn't. That was not the point, how I played. For him to give me some just food for thought, which I'm still digesting. And then we played chess every day because he loved chess, so do I. And we went for long walks. And it's interesting how he was such a gentleman. He was so sophisticated and refined. He always found a way to give you advice in very subtle way, without telling you, what are you doing this there? How stupid is this or whatever. He would just tell you some stories which seemingly had nothing to do with, even sometimes with music or with your playing, which actually eventually I realized what an important lesson it was for me. For example, he was very friendly with Stravinsky and told me many stories about Stravinsky. But one, he quoted Stravinsky just like this during the walk without any connection to me, seemingly. He said, you know, at the end of his life, Stravinsky told him, you know, Grisha, I suddenly realized I don't have time anymore to be in a hurry. And I thought, oh, yeah, it's clever. But it took me quite a while to realize how important advice it was for me, because when I left Soviet Union and started my second life, as I always thought, I was almost 25 years old. My gosh, I was so old, ridiculous. Because I started so-called career with some competitions and concerts when I was quite young. And then eventually I had to stop playing cello for 2 years for different reasons. I had difficult experience in former Soviet Union. And when I came out, these 2 years were like 20 years of life experience. So it was, I felt very old and felt like I had to catch up. And I saw all these youngsters in the West making their debut with New York Philharmonic at the age of 9 or 11 or whatever the hell. And I felt incredibly old. And so I was in a hurry and doing things too fast. And that's, of course, counterproductive very often. And I always compare this with example of trying to fill your glass with water. If you open the faucet too strong, the glass will never be full. It will be always half empty. So this is actually a very important point about trying to put things in perspective and yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Mischa. We just have a couple of minutes left before we have to move on to the next student, I'm afraid.
Okay, it's good to know. Actually, I totally forgot to look at my, because I forgot to warn you. Of course, opposed to some people who have talent of making long story short, I have talent of making the story even longer and talk too much sometimes. But anyway, there is no time to go through the details of the piece, and you played very well as whatever I could hear, which was actually a bit difficult. It was muted even when you didn't use the mute. And but in any case, it's a fantastically well-written piece, and Prokofiev made all the indications. They're so clear that I hardly can say anything concrete about this particular movement, the way you play. I mean, it always can be better, obviously. I'm sure you realize this. We all, no matter how hard we try to improve, I think I always say that trying to reach perfection in music, it's an illusion. It's the same like trying to reach the horizon. The closer you come, the more it goes away. So obviously, but it doesn't mean one shouldn't try to come closer. But it's endless process, and as long as you realize that you will never achieve the perfection, then there is no frustration. So good luck, and it was very nice to meet you and to hear you. And I hope you listen to the others playing as well, because that was actually golden rule in both Shostakovich and Vygotsky class, that we all had to be present, no matter who was playing. Because nowadays, I remember when I was attempting to give masterclasses in C and academic Gian, young cellists were practicing most of the time and then come and play. And so, I mean, you can learn sometimes more even from listening to the others when you're more detached from the, and yeah, so good luck.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Of course, I will stay out. I'm really appreciate it.
Something is with our audio connection. I know how well you can hear me, but you're so far away. It feels almost like you're in Ireland or something.
Father sends his thanks anyway, Mischa. Thank you so much. I hope you watch it now.
I can hear you very well.
Yes. I think it must have just been his Wi-Fi, but we could all hear you perfectly, so it's great.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I think we'll bring on the next student for today, Michael, if you'd like to join us.
Hello. It's lovely to meet you again.
Hello.
I hope you can hear all right. Is this all good?
It's better. It's much better in your case, yes. At least it's much closer in your case.
That's good to hear. I'll be playing Beethoven C major, the Andante and the Allegro vivace.
Fantastic. Opus 102, number 1. Bravo, bravo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful, very nice. Unfortunately, major part is missing because, of course,
The piano, of course.
without piano, it's not the same. Yes, but we all hopefully know and can imagine and feel it in our imagination. I feel it's not the same because it's obviously affects your playing depending with whom you play, what piece of it is, but depending on partner, instrument, everything is important. Acoustics of the whole, the audience, even more so for me personally, and your partnership on stage, of course. That's why it's never the same and always interesting. Yeah, Beethoven was one of the very few of the great composers, along with Bach, who was generous enough to us cellists by writing 5 sonatas and variations, which basically, similarly to Bach's 6 suites, give us chance for have 2 evenings and go sometimes. As we all know, I listened yesterday to part of the complete sonatas played in one day, one concert, so to say. Shostakovich did it as well with Richter, I remember. But it's a bit too much. Usually dividing it in combination with variations in 2 concerts is, I think, makes 2 perfect programs. Anyway, but so we certainly can be very grateful having
Definitely, yeah.
such incredible music. I have a very special relationship with hopefully with every piece I play. That's the idea. But with all Beethoven sonatas, and this in particular, strangely enough, even though I didn't play it since ages, I was thinking when I was preparing mentally, trying to find the music in any case for today's encounter. I don't like even to call it masterclass because I have different. I know I'm probably very strange and type of person because I have. It's definitely my problem. I'm definitely wrong because everybody feels different. But then again, not always majority because the right answer. So it's that's another philosophical issue. But anyway, the point is that the people think the idea of masterclass, and there's a student and there's a master. I believe the idea of masterclass should be when so-called students are already masters, and so-called teacher, because of his experience or certain qualities or whatever. Age sometimes helps as well. Can help them to realize what in chess, I like chess very much. There is difference between master and grandmaster. Or in music, it's difference between master and an artist. And because this is finally the most important and most difficult part, this last step, no matter what you do in life. We all, probably, most of us in any case, sometimes attempt to cook. I try not to do it very often, only when I'm alone at home with children. It's my responsibility. I have my specials. But I always make jokes that if I concentrate and don't talk too much, I can boil pretty good eggs. Ha ha ha. Anyway, implying that I'm not a good cook. But still, some people are better. But then there are great chefs. And it's something else, And the same, no matter what you do in life, sometimes I compare this to climbing the mountains, which I never did. But I go very often, every summer, to Verbier Festival, whatever, Swiss mountains. And I live in Belgium, which is flat country. But we have now our dense hills, which we call mountains. Anyway, and then there are magnificent Alps in Switzerland, Austria. But then there is Everest. And people who climb the mountains, they say that this last few hundred meters, that's what makes the difference, really, at the end of the day. And it's the same no matter what you're doing in life. So that's why my idea of Masterclass is not just to speak about this and that, but generally to try to help you to realize what's what and who is who and why we're trying to do what we're doing. But okay, anyway, I was, in 1969, actually around the corner here in the musical part of my studio, where the piano, I have few posters which particularly important to me. And the only thing I brought with me from Russia, from Soviet Union when I left in 1972, I hardly had anything. A small suitcase and some kind of cello I brought. But I brought this poster, which is there framed, of the concerts I played in 1969 on the 7th and 11th of May, to be precise. I can show you the picture of it because I couldn't go there. Anyway, of complete Bach suites with, complete Beethoven sonatas, of course, and in variations, with great Radu Lupu, because we were studying together. He's a couple of years older, and that was the year when he was finishing conservatory, Moscow Conservatory. And for his final exam as a pianist, he offered complete, for a choice, complete Beethoven sonatas and variations. And sorry, I'm too distracted. Complete Beethoven concertos for piano. And for chamber music exam, I cannot find it. Here it is. For chamber music exam, he offered complete Beethoven sonatas and variations, and I was his partner. And we came on stage. We didn't know where we were going to play. So just before this, we did. I will try to show you. I don't know if you can see the picture of this poster. I don't know how well it's with the light, if you can see.
Yeah, I can see it.
But doesn't matter. Of these two concerts, which were quite unforgettable, because in my opinion, Radu Lupu is one of the greatest pianist musicians, and it's one of the reasons I consider myself the luckiest cellist in the world, is because of, in addition to my teachers, because of partnership in chamber music, starting with Radu Lupu already then in student years, and of course Marta Hardevich, more than 45 years, we're closest friend and partners, and many other great pianists, violinists. I shouldn't even, we'll spend all the time making pieces and conductors and so on. But yeah, this was particularly memorable experience, because we came on stage and they chose this sonata, probably because it's the shortest one. Yeah. So that's the sonata we played his final exam, which became my final exam too, because they were so impressed that I got my final exam of chamber music in advance. Wow. So this, I was still 2 years studying conservatory, but anyway. And then The other, one of the most memorable of many, many lessons of Shostakovich, which I very often remind myself and tell about, was with this sonata as well. And it was one of the shortest lessons. I remember I was listening, I didn't play, luckily, because it was not very complimentary to this young lady who played this student. She played, and he stopped her probably after these two movements, same like he just did, and gave her lecture about Beethoven and how different composers, their music is like, for sculptors work with different materials, you know. And because she was, you know, very gentle young lady, and she was just doing the meow meow something anyway, and he told her then it's this kind of this allegro vivace, this music, it's made out of hard stone granite. It's the question of it's not the Play-Doh which children make soft and shape into whatever. It's anyway. He gave her a very short but very impressive lecture about Beethoven, and ended up saying, "Do you understand that you're playing it badly?" She said, "Yes, but what can I do?" He said, "What do you mean, play it well?" And then she said, "Yes, but it's difficult." He looked at her and said, "And life is easy?" Next one. That was the end of the lesson. So, but it was very profound in a way, because very often whenever in music and playing, or generally in life, when something is really difficult and you struggle to overcome this difficulty, I always, all my children complain about it. I always remember this. So is life. I mean, life is not easy, and to try to play such a great music, it's a great responsibility, and it's very challenging, because no matter how hard we try, it's very difficult to come close enough to the height of this music. But that's the idea, very important point. Then we should try to bring the audience with us, as close as possible up towards this music, opposed to pulling this music down closer to earth. It's very important, different outlook on what we do. So, okay, but maybe we should try still to go a little bit through, because you see, in case of Beethoven, it's incredibly important. What edition do you use? Probably it's the same Handel, no?
It's actually, I'm not sure. It was just sheet music that my teacher gave me, and I actually.
But you have bar numbers at least.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, great, because then it will be easier to communicate a little bit. Anyway, and I'm sure that usually there's not great difference in editions. It's all. So you see the indication he puts in the beginning of Andante, dolce cantabile and teneramente. You know what teneramente means?
Tenderly?
Yes, wonderful, very tender. Yeah, so it's basically already a very clear indication of the general atmosphere, and you're doing it very well. Then depends on the edition. In my edition, I think it must be Handel. Doesn't matter. Whoever edited the cello part, put the bowings, and in this case, I agree with it, because I mean, again, bowings. I always make the point, it's not the most important thing. I can play down, you can play up, fingering, sort of. Again, it's as long as it's, but you see, there is typical American expression, money doesn't buy happiness, which is true. No, but American is the ending to it. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it helps, which is true as well, actually. The point is that good bowings or fingerings don't make your performance perfect. But it helps if you're using them not in order to make your life easier, but exactly opposite, to find a better musical expression. So the idea of starting everything down bow, it's very natural somehow. And it's okay in this case, actually. There are other cases when, in my opinion, makes more difference. But here, yeah. Anyway, it's not so important, but maybe try. Much more important is, I'm incredibly sensitive, too sensitive. I'm sure it's probably my problem too, of using open strings and harmonics.
Okay.
Because if you do it for the particular purpose of color or opposite, fine. But most of the time, 99 times out of 100 happens just because, to make it unconsciously, of course, to make it a little bit easier. Why do I have to press finger and make a vibrato when there is open string or harmonics? Sorry. This is, so for example, I don't know. It bothers me because it's like story of Cinderella. It's like all the notes are important and beautiful, and then one of them, for some reason, has to be dressed not as nicely. So, and there are many other places, like even the beginning of the Allegro Vivace. In this case, it's maybe not as dramatic, but still, even as short as these quarters are, I'm sorry, you're, and they call them different. Quavers,
You just broke up there for
semi-quavers, but you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, as short as they are in this tempo, still on C, you give this some vibrato, and for the it's as important as any other note.
Yeah.
So Shostakovich used to give us a very simple exercise. He said, okay, instead of A minor, play in B minor. You would never even think it if you don't have open string.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Think about it. This
Yeah.
is just one example. There's another example. There's many, and maybe even more in some other music. But generally speaking, just in connection with bowings and fingerings, it's important point, which very often neglected, and I think it's good to think about it. Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, then as well, of course, again, it's much more natural and easier when you play actually with the piano. When you play alone, you have to imagine, but still, one has to very clearly have clear idea who, when has more important voice and part, and because again, you know it, I know it. It's not like story of this conductor who came as a guest conductor in the first rehearsal of Brahms Symphony. He opened the score, looked and said, I know it, you know it, see you at the concert. And then the second horn player, young musician, said, but maestro, I never played it, I don't know it. He said, young man, it's a beautiful music, you'll enjoy it. So, okay, that's a silly story, but apparently true. Anyway, but what I'm trying to say, you know it, I know it, okay. But the point is that I always play not for connoisseurs who know this music, but I imagine people who hear it for the first time. Yeah. And they don't know it. And we have to do everything to help them to enjoy it and to discover to take them on this journey and show them this beautiful landscape with everything what there is around to see. So that's why I'm very often criticized by exaggerating things. Yeah, and sometimes probably I do too much, but it's question again finding balance, and I believe that it's better to do a little too much than too little, because again, in order for people to notice, you really have and to help them. And in case of playing sonatas like this with the piano, which you have to clearly help them to switch attention to, for example, it's small. Bar number 8. Eight and 9. Yes. 8 and half of the bar 9. Piano takes over clearly in importance. And I notice you playing like nothing happens. And it's a question of dynamics and certain intensity, different vibrato, different color, different. Then to help them to realize, and pianist, of course, has to come out more. And then you take over again. So it's a question of dialogue and conversation, which, you see, because again, you go to the museum and you see the big painting, great masters, and unless you're freak and you know, some real expert and connoisseur, you don't look into, don't think, don't realize all kind of little details. You just enjoy the complete painting. Yes? But then if you look at some fantastic books where they put the whole page on the small detail, you know, the face, the hand, and examine the shadows and different colors. You realize how many tiny little details great masters took care of in order to bring this painting to life. See, and that's the same in music. There's so many small little things which by themselves seem to be what difference it makes. These fingerings, this bowing, this dynamics. At the end of the day, that's what makes this whole, the end result makes a difference. See, because, you know, again, you have to watch the time, yes? When we started. Okay, anyway.
There's about, we just have a couple of minutes left, sorry.
Oh, it's only, okay, forget. I'm done.
5 minutes left, yeah.
It's really not that difficult. It's beautiful. As long as you play dolce cantata and a few little things here and there, it's fine. Now, Allegro vivace. It's very important point again. Without looking at the music, can you forget about the music? Look at me. I don't know. I can see you. Can you tell me what is it called? Time indication?
I think it was 144.
No. I don't mean the metronome markings, but how we call it? Oh, shit. Is it 3 quarters, 4 quarters, whatever? What is it?
4 quarters.
Yes and no. That's a very important point. It is. There is 4 quarters in the bar. Yes, but it's alla breve.
Okay.
There is one very important detail of the line crossing this letter C. Did you remember this? Do you know this?
Yeah.
Probably do, but one forgets about it. But it's very important indication because it's, in my opinion, it's indication it shouldn't be in 4.
Okay.
It should be in 2, and it's indication of tempo. Again, Allegro vivace, but this alla breve makes a difference. And it's a question of very tiny difference in this case, but still, it's a question of feeling. 1, 2, 1, not 1, 2, 3, 4. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I think there is reason why there are so many other examples, and even the same Beethoven G minor, second sonata, opus 5. last movement is the best example because it's very controversial about the tempo. Do you play this G minor sonata as well?
No, I haven't.
Okay, but you know it, of course. It's not like this. He wrote, you see, those are, again, I'm sorry, but I hope you understand me if I speak in continental way and not
Right, no, it's fine.
British way. Those are 8 notes and not quarters. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yeah.
He wrote on 2. He could easily, instead of 8 notes, write quarters, instead of 16 notes, 8, and so on. He would use much less ink and time if he would do this way. Why did he write it in 2 instead of 4? There must be a reason for it. And again, in case of this sonata, you know, it's opus 5. It's a young Beethoven. We have sometimes idea of Beethoven being, you know, this deaf old man. He was very young and full of incredible energy. And this movement is just champagne. Yeah? And it gives completely different character. And it was Shostakovich when he played with Richter, as I mentioned before. Sviatoslav Richter I met him. He was an incredible pianist, musician, and very unusual man altogether. And he didn't care about the names of performers or fame or whatever. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe if I should have mentioned the traditional, anyway, it doesn't matter names, but traditional, I think everybody played usually quite a bit slower. He just took the scores, he looked what indicated and played it. They played it quite a bit faster than anybody was used. And I remember it was a big scandal in the West. Oh, what those Russians think, who the hell they think they are? I mean, yeah, Beethoven wasn't Russian, but that's not the point. See, the point is that, yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it. There's wonderful story about Vladimir Horowitz. Maybe I shouldn't. That's maybe too risky. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The point is that it's quite difficult, not only for pianists, of course, but for cellists as well to play it in this tempo. And that's why very often, unconsciously again, it's played slower because it's much easier to solve the technical issues. But that's not good enough reason. If it's too difficult, don't play it.
Yeah.
If you're there are certain things I never played in my life period for different reasons. And there are certain pieces which I played and even recorded and don't play it anymore because I just feel that, you know, I cannot do justice and it's okay. There's nothing to be ashamed of. But if you do, you have to try to be as faithful as I already mentioned before to the text as well as the spirit. So this alla breve, it's important point. Then, okay, quickly a few other things. For example, just one tiny little example. It's, you know, it's bar 41, 40, 41 or something like this. Yeah?
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. It's, again, as much as he indicated, my wrote indication, in this case, there is no different indication. It's all piano, yes?
Yeah.
But G major. There is definitely, you should notice and indicate the difference in intensity and color and something. It's very subtle things, but again, as I said, that's what makes at the end, it brings it to life. See, it's again, it's tiny little example. There are plenty of those kind of examples everywhere, but this just first comes to mind. Think about it, yes? Yeah. Then, let's say, yes, subito forte. Subito forte in case of Beethoven, it's extremely important. And it's always important, but, and he had certain dynamic indications which weird, seems to be unnatural. It's not a mistake. When he clearly wanted, there are other sonatas where it's even more obvious, but still there's okay, in bar 66.
Yeah.
There's diminuendo until the end and subito forte in the beginning of the bar. It's very difficult. You have consciously think about it to make it work, and not to make little crescendo at the end of the, not anticipate this subito forte.
Yeah.
And Shostakovich asked us to make very simple exercise. He said, okay, play again, forget about subito forte. Play just these 2 bars continuously and piano. Until I indicate to you, okay, and he would make us play 20 times, and then, and now, this subitus has to be a real surprise for yourself. You see, and then it has to shock to wake up some old lady in the front row, or maybe even in the 5th row, and not. And there's many other, even in this moment, there are similar places coming in again. Again, those are little things which make the difference. Or for instance, the ending first, and then, okay, continuation after a repeat. And you did it. Actually, I'm sorry. I should have mentioned straight away that certain things I will mention, don't take it personally.
Yeah.
I just want to point out important things, even if you maybe did it, but for everybody and for you as well to think in general. Here he clearly indicated the difference between piano and pianissimo. Because this modulation, this turn in the different tonality into development, it's very important to notice. It's not the same. See, it has to have clearly different light, different direction, different intensity.
Yeah.
And so pay attention to these kind of little things. And then actually, if
Mischa, sorry to interrupt. Sorry, we just have 1 minute
okay,
left.
last point, because there's yes, and then at the end of the moment, for some reason, instead of just 8 notes with pauses, here he wrote, those are quarters without pauses, yes?
Yeah.
I hope you remember this and notice this yourself, but in this case, you played it very similarly. It's very natural. You get used. I'm sure that's not a mistake. Well, maybe it is, but maybe he forgot to put the pause. I never met Beethoven. I cannot check it. Anyway, but still, I'm sure it's no mistake. He was very particular. So those little things are extremely important.
Yeah.
And one has to be, that's why one should play this kind of thing, music, in any case with music, unless pianist plays from memory. It's disrespectful to pianists to play it without score, if he does with the score, because, but anyway, even if you know it by memory, but it helps to notice small details like this, which at the end, they make the difference.
Yeah,
I'm sorry we have to go on.
It's perfect.
But thank you very much, and you play very well. And but as I always say, it can be even better.
Definitely.
Idea.
Thank you for everything. It was a pleasure, really.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Good luck.
That's great. Thank you so much. So we'll bring on our next student today, Callum, if you'd like to join us.
Oh, sorry. Hello.
Hello. And you're doing Beethoven as well.
Yes, the first movement from the A major Sonata.
Oh my gosh, Opus 69. Oh.
It's a little bit fresh, but
It always is.
yeah.
Hopefully, in a positive way. But yeah, no. Before we even start, I mean, it's the most famous and most kind of often played sonata, and it was the last which I dare to play, even though I had to play all of them already then. But like so many other most famous pieces, somehow I had certain complexes with Schumann concerto, with Haydn D major, with Brahms F major opposed to E minor, with Opus 69 of Beethoven opposed to Opus 5 or even 102. Because you see, there's certain danger. These pieces, which are the most famous, most beautiful, supposedly, they're all beautiful, which we hear so much long before we see the music.
Yeah.
And there are so many traditions which very often are not necessarily the ideal way of approaching the music. Beware of traditions.
Okay.
One should never idolize anybody. I did myself. I'm not implying that I'm perfect at all, quite the opposite. I tell my children all the time, you know, the idea of teacher, good teacher, I imagine, because I'm not, but still. And it's the same like a parent. I have 6 kids. That's why I'm much more experienced in this. Is to help your children or your students to avoid mistakes which you did. To help them to learn from your own mistakes and help them with your experience. That's the whole idea of evolution. So, you know, when I was 8, I started playing cello when I was 8 years old. And from the moment I started playing cello, I idolized Shostakovich. He was my hero. And when I spoke about Shostakovich, my neck hurt because I looked so high up. You know, it was a dream of my life to study with him and so on. And it took me a very long time, with his help, actually. He was the first to tell us, never idolize any performer to the point that it becomes more important than the composer. No matter how good, how fantastic, how successful, how famous the interpreter is, all of us, compared to great composers in music like this we play, we're all equally small and negligent in comparison. So one should always put the composer first and the text first. But anyway, sorry, let's hear your beautiful A major.
Oh, sorry.
Bravo, bravo. I don't know why, but with you as well, I had some issues with the sound when you playing. It was a little bit far away, and ponticello a little bit. I don't know if it's your mic connection, or I hope it's not my. I mean, I hope maybe it's better if it's my problem here, then everybody could hear you better. I hope.
I think I could hear pretty well. Yeah.
Yes, okay, then something here, but because, yeah, okay. Anyway, the other veteran I heard much better than Prokofiev for this one. But anyway, doesn't matter. I try to imagine, and I still could hear that you played very well, even though you think it was fresh, but it was very impressive. And do you play the
I think he's just.
whole sonata, I hope, yes?
Sorry, Mischa, could you just repeat that? You just froze on us a bit.
Oh gosh, here we go again.
Oh, we're back. We're back. It's okay.
I'm back. Okay, great. What I asked, do you play the complete sonata by now?
Oh no, I've only like just started. Like I will in the coming few weeks, but like
Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But you know probably the rest in that case, because it's important little point. Because I always say, and I was going to point out again in your case as well, how important it is to notice certain subtle differences in intensity and coloring of the same phrase in different tonality, depends on the time when where it comes and when it comes, and so you could try to make it even more impressive. But in some cases, and that's very rare and very good example, is the second movement of this sonata, which exactly opposite. It's like moto perpetuo. So it comes again and again, and there the point is then one shouldn't try to change and find a variety. It's quite opposite. It goes continuously. It's like comes out of nowhere and continues somewhere else. It never starts and never ends. See what I mean? So that's something else. So there it repeats again and again, and it's no problem to play it identically dynamically and whatever. But most of the time, it's not the case. And I'll come to this point, but maybe we should start from the beginning. Because I was talking already about with C major, it's not as important as here, the question of bowings and starting down or up. Again, you can start down, of course, as you do. But, and still do, it's a question of phrasing and what is for you, it's important to figure out, again, it's also subjective, how you feel, where does it go? Okay, there is let's say, first 6 bars, yes? You see, I will exaggerate now to make the point. Either you feel this way, or see which one is more, where does it, in my opinion, it goes into 2nd bar and into the 4th bar. So that's why it makes certain sense. It's totally not absolutely necessary, but to try at least to start maybe in this case up bow. Because of course, again, you're obviously good enough cellist to be able to do upper part of the bow as intense or even more than the down. But logically, you have more weight here, and it's more natural. Similar Brahms C minor. I don't know. Do you play Brahms C minor sonata? No, but you know it, yes. It's the same. So again, I'm exaggerating, but to make the point of the direction, it's just a question of finding certain shape within the short phrase, which again, at the end of the day, those little details make difference. And then when, okay, you have bar numbers from, yes, I said.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit easier than, so you know, where is it? 20, 19, 18, 17, 18, bar 18 before the. Of course, again, when you play with piano, it helps to, it reminds you, even though you, of course, probably remember what's happening there. And from this moment, the piano part influences very much the certain quality and intensity of your long note. It's not the same. Yes, okay, maybe it's not such an important example, but there are many others. Okay, let's go after the fermata. Yes.
Yeah.
Again, here we go with the open strings. I mean, I don't know if you heard what I was talking about before. I'm super sensitive, probably too much, maybe not, about using too much of open strings and harmonics just because they're there. As I was saying, if Shostakovich was made us play the same piece in different tonality, just imagine if it would be one tone higher. You never play. It's a long note in the beginning.
Yeah.
I think it's pity. You have to give it a little bit. And so sometimes it's not so important, but think about it. As a general rule, I think it's important to notice this. And if you do it consciously, just because you feel that this is appropriate and you, okay, that's something else. I might agree or disagree, but that's perfectly fine. But if it is just because it's there and without even realization, just to make it easier and more convenient or whatever, because nobody does it on purpose, because, but still, it's a bad habit. Think about it. Okay, then again, bowings. It's question of phrasing, again, not question of bowings. What is it? This subito I just made, it's totally unimportant, but you can, when it comes 3 times, you can do something. So it's not totally repetition as well, repetitive as well as in case of in dynamics and color. But bowings, very often phrases don't start with the beginning of the bar. This bar line, it's just indication and shouldn't be, one shouldn't hear it. So it starts with upbeat tone. In this again, it's not the best example. It's not that important here. And you did later. Not this. See, nobody does that badly, but still very often you hear this, music becomes very square.
Yeah.
And it's anything but. It has much more flexibility and bowings shouldn't be depending on the bar lines, which very often is the case, again, kind of automatically, and it's not good. Then immediately after this comes, which you did this time, you did pretty good, but then later not as good. Again, this question of subito forte. This is very good exercise to play it again and again, piano. And then at some point, suddenly, totally surprisingly for everybody, you included, comes subito forte. Not to make any anticipation, just try to make him think of diminuendo, even if it's not written there. If you think diminuendo into this forte, then you won't make crescendo at least.
Yeah. Okay.
And for Beethoven, it was very important. When he wanted, he wrote crescendo. There are scenarios now, if I'll find example of, there are plenty, of course, where into forte there goes crescendo and then one thing, but this is clear subito. And then immediately, soon after this, it is always difference between forte and fortissimo. No matter how it, it's very difficult to make this lower register more intense than, but you always have to leave some reserve, and one way or another, it's not even a question only of quantity of sound, but certain intensity. You have to, at least you have to try and to remember the difference between forte and fortissimo, he writes. It's very important. Then anyway, into development, yes. You didn't do repeat now, but hopefully you're doing it in now to save time, of course.
Yeah.
And because again, the question of repeats is a very important issue. Particularly in question of, in case of Bach, so it's pity nobody plays Bach today, but okay. But in any music, in principle, as far as I'm concerned, I believe that I even don't like the word repeat, because nothing in music, like in life, nothing repeats. Now we're already about 2 hours older than when we started this. And I probably got a couple of more gray hair, or maybe not, because it's already impossible to add. But anyway, what I mean is that we're older and hopefully a bit wiser or whatever. Anyway, life continuously changed. The earth moves all the time. Everything is, even if we don't notice this, you see. And so in music as well, nothing really repeats. So if there is, composers use this repeat sign in order to save paper, time to writing. It's totally natural, but it doesn't mean that it's never really the same. There is certain development happening, and particularly the ending of the in this case. It's one thing if it goes into back into A major, or again, I'm exaggerating, but the idea is that something is happening in this bar. He didn't write diminuendo, but it's not a bad idea to add for yourself, just to remind you. It's just a change of color. It's like in the theater decoration. I very often wish that even in the concerts, the electrician would participate and help us a little bit with the lighting. Of course, it's silly. It's not necessary. We can, but do it with the colors. You see, it's a question of colors. I have kids, as I told you, 6, all different ages. Youngest is just turned 6 years old, and at this age they color things. And you get them set of 6 different colors or 12, and usually that's where it stops because they don't need more. And however, the great painters, not only they have much more different colors, but they mix their own colors to make many different shades of the same color. And tiny little variations, which that's what again makes difference and brings this painting to life. The same with music. We have to find more and more chords. It's never enough. Different vibrato, different intensity, different, of course, right hand bowing, bow technique. It's incredibly important. People think about left hand technique. The colors come very much from the right hand as well as left. So, and to really to change the atmosphere and so the completely different, dark, and he kind of a little bit lost. And he's getting question mark. He ends suddenly in F sharp minor. Yes. Okay, that's where journey begins. This development, going through different landscapes before coming back home at the end of the moment. Yes, and that's good. Yes, then much later, in bar 126, 7. Instead of this is C sharp minor is different than F sharp minor, and it happens after all this development journey, and it has much more intensity and completely different. See, you have to notice and help everybody else to notice this difference in color and intensity, because and the same happens all the time. Bar 140 or whatever it is, yes, pianissimo, yes. The same pianissimo. But again, it's completely different feeling. This, it's so in. And again, you can do it one way or another. It doesn't have to be, it can be different way, but it can't be the same. For me, clearly, it's because here it's very far away from A major, still kind of. It's a little bit. He's still a little bit lost, and you start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Here we are. We come back home, so to say. You see your final destination, and so yeah, that's
just a quick reminder about time. We've about 5 minutes left in this lesson, so 5 minutes.
Great. Sorry. Okay, and there's so many things like this later again, but there is very important point at this moment, which I absolutely can, because in this moment it's amazing. I don't remember how long it is, but it's quite a long moment with if you play with the repeat particularly, and it's continuously. It always ends this melodic element in the dominant. Yes, he continuously cannot find. He looks for the destination, and it goes on and on, and he cannot find it. Then it comes at the very end. Yes. First of all, it's the only time it's fortissimo. Yes. It's important. And then the miracle happens. He suddenly finds how simple it was, always just around the corner. It's like we're looking for something all over the house, and then suddenly you're young, and I don't wear glasses either, but some people look for their glasses all day long, and then they discover they were on top of their head. So that's similar example. Wow. It's a miraculous place when he finds the answer to this question. It's always question. He always ends up with a question, and then that's the first time the answer. And he enjoys it so much, he keeps repeating. Back home in A major, and so on. So again, this I noticed that you played it. I'm exaggerating, but like nothing happened. It's very important moment, and you have to notice this with quality of sound, with dynamics, with color, and with timing. Tiny little, not too much, but tiny little timing can help. To millisecond of time, if you take time, it immediately gets your attention that something is happening, and that's very important point in this moment when he finds this answer to the question. Yes, gosh, it's finished. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm always sorry that it's too short, but that's how life is. Anyway, thank you very much. You play whatever I could hear, even with this ponticello a little bit in my speaker. I don't know why. You play very well, and then it's difficult sonata. I found it for some reason. For me, it's the most difficult out of 5. I don't know, but bravo and good luck, and enjoy the rest of it and the rest of the sonatas, because it's incredible.
Thank you.
It was supposed to be last year, Beethoven year. And then Mark Aldrich told me that somebody discovered, it sounds like a joke, but maybe not. Then actually he was born a year later. So it's again, maybe because of pandemic or whatever, we extended, and it's again Beethoven year. But I always say every year is Beethoven year. The same like every year is Bach year or any great composer. So as important as some anniversaries are, never mind. It's this kind of music. Yeah, it's beyond this insignificant numbers. Anyway, thank you very much and good luck, and
Thank you.
hope to meet you in more direct situations at some point.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That's great, Callum. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to our last student of the day, Catherine, if you'd like to join us.
Hello. Lovely to meet you.
Hello, fine, thank you. You're the youngest one.
Yeah, I think so.
Great. Is it correct? I checked. I'm kind of curious. I don't know why. It's totally unimportant. But are you just 18 or something?
Yeah, I'm 18.
Yes, I remember correctly. Wow, it's fantastic age, 18. Yeah, that's exactly the age when I start studying with Shostakovich. I was 18.
Wow.
It was a long time ago, but then again. Anyway, never mind. Okay, forget it. You didn't Shostakovich.
Yeah, the last movement.
Only last movement. And of course, you play a complete concerto. You didn't start with last movement.
No, I'm learning the whole thing. This is probably the movement I'm most
It'd
comfortable
be great
with.
if you would play cadenza for us too, but you don't have to. Well, because it's very important, you see, the connection and preparation and how in the transformation from this incredible slow movement, second movement, in the beginning of cadenza, and then what's happening during the cadenza and going into the last moment. It helps, of course, but okay.
I could go for maybe the last little bit of the cadenza.
You can play whatever you want, or as much as you want, or as little as you want. It's fine. We'll. Bravo, bravo.
Thanks.
Thank you. Can you play for me just for fun? First 2 bars or 4 bars of very beginning of the concerto. You remember, of course, probably, no?
The very first movement.
Very beginning of the first movement.
Sorry, I don't know what
more than enough. Because, actually, that's a funny story. One of my most beloved colleagues and friends, Natalia Gutman, who I adored for all my life and still do. We were together in the jury of Queen Elizabeth competition a few years ago, sitting next to each other. And I predicted, actually, it's interesting, because before the competition, because I live in Belgium, not by chance.
Yeah.
I don't know why it happens. One must live somewhere. People ask, why do you live in Belgium? I said, why not? Anyway, that's something else. I'm not going to get it. But so, yeah, Belgian television invited me for an hour of talking about the competition in advance, and they challenged me to predict which concerto will be the most popular in the finals, among the finalists. I immediately said Shostakovich #1. And I said, and you will see, the first prize, the winner will play Shostakovich #1. That's what happened. 6, if not 7 out of 12, 6, I believe, finalists played Shostakovich #1, by far, with Dvorak and everything else. And the first prize was Shostakovich #1, the second 2. Anyway, okay, but so we had a lot of Shostakovich concertos. But I remember that Natalia, before another Shostakovich concerto, she turned to me and said, everything will be clear after first 3 notes. And I looked at her and said, Natasha, give him a chance, make it 4. I mean, 3 notes, come on, really, that's not exaggerating. Yeah, anyway, that's but certain things are clear from the beginning. I remember, again, I was talking about unforgettable lesson with Beethoven C major sonata. There's so many unforgettable lessons with Shostakovich, just no matter how many years passed. But anyway, because, arguably, I always say, when people ask me, how was Shostakovich as a teacher? I always say, as it might sound even kind of sacrilegious to say such a thing, but I always say, everybody knows that he was one of the greatest cellists ever, it's obvious. But in my opinion, as great as he was as a cellist, he was even greater as a teacher. In certain way, because he had such an incredible imagination, fantasy, and knowledge about music, and that this wooden box was just not enough for him to express all of it. He was sitting, he never played cello for us. He was sitting on the second piano, he played fantastically well piano, and was doing goodness were there and telling stories. And sometimes I maybe shouldn't say this, but I confess that certain pieces, let's say Debussy someone, or quite a few others, I heard so many different lessons times in class, the same piece, every time different, and with so many stories and so many colors and pictures, and then when you heard him play the same piece later, sometimes it was even, I shouldn't say this, a little bit disappointing, because compared to how he was expressing this during the lessons, it was never, it couldn't be as impressive.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why he started conducting as well. One of the reasons, because of course he had even more possibilities with orchestra to express his fantastic personality as a musician and everything else. So anyway, but yeah, the point is, yeah, I remember this lesson. One of his students, fantastic cellist, all of them of us were very high level. But I won't even mention the name, it doesn't matter, because you might even know. It was, I shouldn't say even her, but it was her, doesn't matter. It was first lesson of the day, and he just arrived and was still settling down when she started playing. And he kind of, for a second, he kind of smiled even, because he thought she was joking. And then so he stopped and he, no, wait a minute, okay, let's start again. And then he was constantly, and she said, okay. Because she played, of course, from memory, obviously. We always had to play this lesson from memory, everything. but that's actually another important thing. Of course, you play this is by heart, as you say in English, yes. But some people, certain things I play, for instance, number 2 concerto, which is completely different and one doesn't play it so often. I played it, of course, by heart. But then lately, when I had to play a game after many years not playing at all, I played with the music. So people say, do you play everything by heart? And I usually make this kind of joke because every joke has grain of truth in it, the expression is. But in Russian, we used to say every joke has grain of joke in it. If it's a good joke, most of it is true because it's anyway. So I made this joke. I said, I always play with heart. By heart is not that important. You can play with music.
Yeah.
What is important is to play with heart. This is important. And the same about when people ask me if I use gut strings, guts. I said, I play with guts. Strings can be metal. You know what I mean? Okay, never mind. So we always played by heart in the class from memory. But he asked her, do you remember what dynamics Shostakovich wrote in the beginning? She says, piano. She remembered. She knew she was very intelligent. So he said, so what are you doing there? So, yes, but I'm going to play with orchestra. And then the question of balance. He said, okay. Then the next question. Do you remember what does orchestra play when you start the concerto? The answer is nothing, first of all. And then even on the long, it's not and all the same. I mean, I'm sorry, you didn't play like this and probably hopefully don't. That's not the point, is general thing. That you see or maybe opposite, maybe this time a little more or something. It's never the same. It has to be lively.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's general point. It's not to do with Shostakovich or anyway. Talking about this concerto, you probably know the story. I don't know, just in case, or maybe even if you know, maybe some others don't. How it was a surprise for Shostakovich. Because with Prokofiev, in case of Prokofiev, I was talking before, when he was writing symphony concerto, Shostakovich was even living with him in his country house and kind of participating. He even admitted that he participated in cello part, and
Yeah.
Prokofiev to write as difficult as possible, but exactly for his phenomenal hands and technique. And at the time, it was considered almost unplayable. Of course, there were some cellists who played, but nowadays everybody plays. It's just unbelievable how level raised. But that's something else. But the point is that in case of Shostakovich, this concerto, he didn't even know Shostakovich, he was writing for him. And then Shostakovich called him, and it was a surprise. He presented him with his score, and Shostakovich was dedicated to him because he was so excited. He just went like crazy to practice 18 hours a day. And on the 4th day, he came to Shostakovich at his pianist and wanted to play for him. Talking about playing by heart, with heart, and so on. Shostakovich was very nervous because it was in this outside Moscow. There was this how we call it, kind of settlement where composers had their calm place to create and so. Anyway, and there's some other composers around there. And Shostakovich was very nervous. He closed all the doors. He didn't want anybody to hear because he was very much afraid of how it would sound. And then he started bringing music stand to Shostakovich, and Shostakovich said, "Thank you, I don't need it." And of course, Shostakovich couldn't imagine that he learned by memory in 4 days, 3.5 days. And said, "No, please, I'm too nervous. Don't make jokes now." He said, "No." He couldn't believe it, and seriously. Anyway, he played from memory the whole bloody piece. Okay? And Shostakovich was sitting there in total disbelief, kind of. He asked me, "Can you please play the game?" So they did play the game. And then Shostakovich said, "We have to call everybody to listen." And he said they called few composers who were there, and Shostakovich played it for the third time. And then they drank a lot of vodka, as they and then Shostakovich says, "I remember I tried to play it again, but I'm not sure. Maybe I played Saint-Saëns concerto or whatever it was, because after so much vodka, it was." Anyway, that's the silly part of the story. The point being that and then a few days later, they actually performed it for the first time in St. Petersburg in Ravinsky, and then again in Moscow. So it's actually phenomenal. One of the quite a few kind of Guinness Book of Records things that Shostakovich did, which nobody really could probably repeat. To learn this kind of concerto from scratch without ever hearing it in 4 days, I mean, it just mind-blowing. But that's fine. At the end of the day, it's not the most important thing. The second concerto, it was in 1959, yes. And then in 1966, that's when I was 18 years old and started studying with Shostakovich after Tchaikovsky competition in September. And 25th of September 1966, it was 60th birthday of Shostakovich. And it was the day when Shostakovich played it for the first time, the second concerto. And the day before, on the 24th, he played the number 1 with Maxim Shostakovich conducting. And then next day, the premiere of number 2, which Svetlana. Anyway, and I was on all the rehearsals, of course. And Shostakovich was there too, sitting, biting his nails. He was very nervous. It didn't go very well until last moment. Although there is, I think, even a recording video of the first performance, which is quite fantastic, of course. But with the orchestra and many things, he wasn't quite happy until last moment. Anyway, altogether, he was very, I met Shostakovich thanks to Shostakovich. I know it's hard to believe. I guess I don't feel my age, I forget how old I am. But of course, when I look at my passport or in the mirror, I realize, oh gosh, I must be, for you, I might be, probably you think I'm ancient on there. So I'm old enough, yes, to brag that I met Shostakovich and many other great musicians. But okay. Again, I don't imply that I couldn't say that I knew Shostakovich, because nobody really knew. Even Shostakovich, who was very close to him and knew him, of course, much better than anyone else, maybe, except his wife, I guess, or whatever. There's one interesting story, maybe. They lived in the same apartment building of Composers Union in different entrances. And one evening, Shostakovich called him and told, "Slava, please, can you come? I really need to speak to somebody." So Shostakovich, of course, dropped everything around and came to Shostakovich's apartment. They sat in the kitchen, his kitchen table, with a glass of vodka each for 1 hour straight. Shostakovich was sitting and sipping this vodka in total silence. After 1 hour, he said, "Thank you so much. It was very important for me." He needed to speak to somebody. I mean, yeah, it's probably difficult for you even to comprehend it, because that's another point. And in Soviet times in Russia, one was afraid to speak about certain things because you never knew who was listening anywhere, no matter where you are in your own apartment. But that's maybe not even the point in this case. But that's just indication what kind of, he was very introvert and full of problems and complexes, and he, in order to survive in Stalin times, and he had to compromise certain things and write certain music which wasn't exactly what he felt, maybe. But okay, anyway, just give you indication about his persona, which is important to understand his music. And anyway, the second concerto, you probably don't play the second. Yes.
I haven't played it, but I know
it's okay, but I hope you will, because it's an incredible piece. I wouldn't dare to say it's better than the first, because nothing is better. But it's incredibly different, and it's amazing if you think about it, that there's only 7 years in between. And of course, when you're 18 years old, as I was then, 7 years, it's half of your lifetime. But when you're, let's say, 60 years or 50 years older, 7 years, what is 7 years in a lifetime? But the difference in atmosphere and the quality, it's so different in music. It's amazing what happened to him in these 7 years. And yeah, it's unfortunately played much less because it's even more difficult for the orchestra in a way. In number one, you need one great horn player. In number two, you need two incredible French horn players, because they have this cadence, if you remember, the two horns playing, it's just so incredible. Anyway, and it ends quietly, which in case of some pieces, people, as a general rule, like when things end loud and it brings, natural reaction of applause. And number two ends quietly. It naturally has less success with the audience, which is a great pity. There's a very good example of Walton concert. I don't know if you know this beautiful piece, which my other teacher, Pitigorsky, commissioned to Walton. And Pitigorsky was very upset that it didn't become really as successful as it is. It's a beautiful piece. And he believed it was because it ended quietly. And he begged Walton to write different ending. And Walton didn't want to. He insisted, no, that's how he envisioned it. And then finally he gave in at the end of his life, and he wrote for Pitigorsky different ending, which Pitigorsky was supposed to play in London with Daniel Barenboim conducting. I was even there, but he was already too ill. It was just before he passed away, and he never did it. So nobody ever actually played this ending. And with the widow of Walton said he didn't want to, so it didn't survive, so to say. But because in certain cases, for composers, there was reason why they did it this way. And it doesn't matter amount of applause, that's not important. But I mean, okay, it's a very different, completely different type of piece and music, and so, but incredibly profound and beautiful number two as well. But number one, it's a masterpiece, like practically almost every. And again, not because I met him, but and I feel very close with this, which obviously was, nobody was as close. It was written for him, and he knew it inside out, and I felt that I got like blood transfusion from Shostakovich in a way. So even when I went to Pitigorsky, I was terribly nervous. As much as I adored and admired Pitigorsky, I met him in Tchaikovsky competition in '66. He was in the jury, and in Russia altogether, Pitigorsky was a legendary figure. And anyway, that's something else. But I was very nervous going to him because I was so influenced by Shostakovich, and I was afraid if Pitigorsky would try to turn me into different direction, I just couldn't. But luckily it was not necessary, because strangely enough, as different as they were, as personalities, musicians, cellists, they had very similar approach to teaching. I was talking already about it before, and it was just continuation of the same journey, of the same direction. So, and I noticed how certain things, they even, Pitigorsky told me in almost the same words, which I got from Shostakovich. And obviously, it was Shostakovich who picked up from Pitigorsky, because they knew each other very well. Shostakovich even stayed at his house when he was in Los Angeles several times. And Shostakovich was so quick, he didn't need masterclass or lessons. A tiny little remark which he could remember and catch. So, and there's nothing to be ashamed of that. You learn from Pitigorsky, or you learn from, I can learn from you as much as you can learn from me. It's okay. It's not a question of age or experience. Although naturally, hopefully, I have more experience than you at the age of 18. Anyway, but what I mean is that I was incredibly much influenced by, still am, by Shostakovich in many ways, but in Shostakovich music particularly, and very proud of it and very happy about it. So this last moment, I always tell to the orchestra musicians, that no matter where you play, who they are, you know what, do me a favor. Can you please, for 6 or 6.5, whatever time it takes, minutes of this moment, forget about civilization.
About what, sorry?
About civilization. About it has this, the character of this moment has nothing to do with beautiful landscapes of Ireland or wherever we might be. Even Belgium actually has some nice places, probably not as beautiful as Ireland. But anyway, it's basically after what happens in this transformation from the second moment through the cadenza and end of the cadenza, which is already just going completely, basically going nuts there. But towards the end of this moment, the whole last moment, in my humble opinion, I might be completely wrong, but I think it's like something like devils dancing in hell. It's really has this. So, and you have to find this power and intensity, which was a little bit not enough for me in the beginning. Then it's kind of got better, but anyway, it's really, even it doesn't matter fourth or fortissimo, but it's not a question of quantity of sound, but even before. This last note and just it's like a knife in your back. And after this, it's not Haydn concerto, or not Schumann, or not anything else. Only Shostakovich could write this, something like this. So it's really important to get to turn into something else. Now, and to find this incredible intensity and character. And then, yeah. Okay, I'm not going to play, it's ridiculous. But number 67, you have big numbers probably there, yes, so bar numbers?
I have like the rehearsal numbers.
67, you have it, yes. Yeah, you played very well, and it's 40, but you have to remember, it's again, like I was talking about Beethoven when you play with piano, you have to realize who and what is what, who has more important element than whatever. In this part, sometimes.
I'm sorry, you're just.
I think you've broken up there, Mischa. If you just want to, when you're unfrozen, you can repeat yourself.
Sometimes they don't come. When did they get frozen?
Now you're back. Great.
Oh my gosh! But at what point did they get frozen? Okay, doesn't matter. The point is that in this place.
Sorry, Mischa. Just froze again.
They frozen again.
You just froze again. We heard. The point is, and then you can go from there.
Yes, okay. Maybe that's not the point. I guess maybe. Yeah, Anyway,
it's good now. Anyway, it's good.
The point is that you have always remember and know exactly. You're the soloist, but sometimes the orchestra has more important element in music, and.
It's frozen again, I think.
Sorry, Mischa, it's just frozen again.
I'm from.
Just a second.
Frozen. Are we there?
We have you again. We have you again. Sorry. There's only a couple, like 5 minutes left anyway. So
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's really is.
honestly, it's okay.
It's wonderful as modern technologies in internet, but when it doesn't work well enough, it's a problem. I don't. In the same time, it's an important point. See, I grew up in the time when I was lucky to study with Shostakovich, Pichigorsky, to meet incredible musicians. I hardly can believe sometimes that not only I was studying with Shostakovich, but on a daily basis, we were almost literally bumping in the corridors of Moscow Conservatory into musicians like Oistrakh, Kogan, Gilels, Richter, and Shostakovich himself, and many others. Actually, Dmitry Bashkirov, who died, may he rest in peace, very recently, great pianist teacher. Some of them who are not as famous as these big names, but incredible musicians. And of course, you probably are very envious, or I hope you are in certain ways about this. On the other hand, you see, I always say you have so many other advantages. We didn't have internet, we didn't have amount of information that you can research and get at your fingertips on YouTube, almost any recording there is, and so use it. It's incredible advantage you have compared to our times, but sometimes it gets frozen. So okay, sorry. Anyway, but yeah, the point is that the very end, for example, if you jump right, although even before, okay, so many little things, but you did really quite well, better and better than with Ferrocci in '74. It's really Ferrocci, whatever that exact translation in English is. And then when it comes to '78, in '79, before '79, when the horn comes back with the first theme, ba, da, 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 bam, 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 and then you take over, and then it comes again here, and everything what goes after this. Already end of the concert, the point is that this first theme which comes again, it's the most important thing in the orchestra, and whatever happens there, you're the. It's not scales and arpeggios, you know. As important as it is, the character is much more important than some people say about in the cadenza already, the culmination of cadenza. The tempo indication which he wrote, it's basically, if you want to play it completely correct, it's not impossible, but it's very difficult in order without sacrificing the character, which is much more important than precision of the notes. See,
Yeah.
so if people play in order to play all these scales correctly, slower, and then when from here, completely different tempo. You start.
You've just frozen again, Mischa. I'm sorry. Now we are back, and we have about 4 minutes left in the lesson.
Okay. Anyway, no, it's very important point, general point about what is more important, because you see, I always say I'm by far not the cleanest cello player.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, you've frozen again. Just a second. You've frozen again.
So many.
Sorry. Just a second. Now he'll just rejoin. Sorry, Catherine.
That's grand. Fine.
Now you're back. Wonderful. Hello. And you just muted, Mischa. Sorry. Would you unmute yourself? You're muted at the moment, Mischa. Sorry. So just if you unmute yourself, then we can continue on. That's great. Thank you.
I did it myself, but somehow it got me. But can you hear me now? Okay.
We can
I'm
hear
sorry.
you. Yeah. No, you're just not moving. Sorry.
It's very frustrating, and I don't even know. But is the sound there?
Yeah,
I
more.
understand, but I think we are almost up, Mischa. It might be worthwhile just to wrap it up now. I'm sorry about this.
Gosh, unstable. Can you hear?
Sorry, Mischa, it's very bad. We can see you now and hear you if you just want to wrap up quickly.
Okay.
No, I don't. Sorry about this. I think what we're going to have to do is just wrap up for today. Sorry about that, Catherine.
To wrap up question music.
Now we can see and hear you if you want to wrap up quickly while we have you. Thank
No,
you,
I was-
Mischa. Yeah.
Very few words quickly. The expression in the music is for me much more important than technical perfection.
Yeah.
And
Oh, after breathing again.
I could play more correct. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe it.
It's
It's
kind of,
okay.
it's just dipping in and out a little bit.
I think we should just finish it there, Mischa. So sorry about
I'm
this.
sorry.
We want to
No,
wrap up with Catherine.
but bravo and good luck, and hopefully we'll have
That was really
a chance to speak in
interesting.
person.
It was
Thank
lovely
you.
to meet you.
Now, sorry about the technical difficulties, but it was brilliant until then.
Wonderful.
Mischa. It was fantastic. Thank you so much for today. Don't worry. So we're going to